let's go to All NBA.
Yeah.
I'll give you a chance to talk about Embiid during All NBA because I think that his conversation is pretty interesting. So we've talked pretty extensively about all the guys that I would have on my first team. I would go Harden, Curry, Giannis, Kawhi, and Anthony Davis.
One more time for that. Harden,
James Harden, Stephen Curry, Giannis, Kawhi, and Anthony Davis.
So I have Paul George on my first team over Kawhi, which I think anyone could have presumed. We've talked about both of those guys. My second team is Embiid, LeBron, Kawhi, Kemba, and Kyrie. The guard.
So for mine, it's Damian Lillard, Kyrie, LeBron, Durant, and Joel Embiid.
Okay. So let's talk a bit about Embiid because I do feel like he deserves to be on the All-NBA first team. But it just doesn't fit this year.
Right.
I mean, honestly, I think Embiid's having I think he's probably more deserving than Curry, but such is the situation to whatever degree. Embiid's having a monster year, and he stayed healthy. This is a guy who has a 109 offensive rating. He's a 6 net player. He's getting the 31 usage. Pull up the stats here. We know what Joel Embiid can do. We know what he is on the defensive end. So he's a true two-way star.
So let me. I have numbers here in terms of what happens when Joel Embiid leaves the floor for the 76ers.
Right.
So they're a 118 offense with him, a 110.7 defense or offense without him. So 110.7 offense without him. They are a 110.4 defense with him, a 115.3 defense without him. He is a plus 12 overall net difference in terms of his team's performance without him versus with him.
I mean, he's up about 4 points per game. He's doing most of the same things. Now, some of that can be attributed to he's taking a couple more shots per game. Most of his numbers in terms of ratio are relatively flat, but he's up in points. He's up in rebounds. He's pretty much on the same with blocks and steals. I mean, again, he's a two-way star. We know what he is. He plays for a good team that has been subject to some chaos this year, and he has been more or less the one constant on it. As much as we are now kind of selling Ben Simmons stock, which is, of course, premature and rather stupid, but as much as that is happening,
this podcast is not selling.
No, I'm not.
I want to be very clear about that.
No, even though I did say that motherfucker needs to shoot something, if nothing else, just to take the eyes away from the hoop for a second. Nevertheless, like as much as that is the narrative now, right? And so much of the NBA revolves around the narrative, and it's a very stupidly creative narrative 9 times out of 10. Let's establish that. It comes through NBA Twitter and all this stuff, and it's not very well thought out, and it's certainly not very analytical. Nevertheless, it's shit on Ben Simmons season. The Jimmy Butler trade has not been the fix-all that no one expected it to be. You have the Markelle Fultz situation. You have a team that is, frankly, it was already weaker than it was the year before, and then it got weaker again, you can argue, at least depth-wise, with the Jimmy Butler thing. Joel Embiid has been the one constant. He is the one thing that has kept this team from, I would argue, I mean, maybe JJ Redick to a certain degree because he's a steady head in the locker room, but Joel Embiid, reliable, night in, night out. He's giving you 33 minutes per game, 26 points per game, 13 rebounds per game. Those are monster numbers. He is a monster on the defensive end. And he's not really in that number 1 or even number 2 tier yet, but he needs to absolutely be at the top around that LeBron and Curry and Jokic conversation because he's been a beast.
So Joel Embiid, per 36 minutes, 28.8 points, 14.4 rebounds. Stephen Curry, per 36 is only averaging 29.9 points. So, like, in terms of pure offensive production, Joel Embiid is on a permanent basis doing exceedingly well. He's doing it on about a 60% true shooting percentage. So it's not even like it's, he's handling all this offensive usage and he shouldn't be handling it.
His usage is down year over year.
Right.
I mean, it's down a percentage point.
And he's still just dominating. He is an unbelievable offensive player. His defense kind of goes underrated a lot of the time.
It's not as good as it was last year. At least the metrics don't bear it out, but he is still that level rim protector. And a lot of that has to do with his teammates. I honestly think that he's probably taken a half step back. The rest of his team has taken 2 or 3.
Yeah, like I think he's a really, really good defender. We don't need to like jump in and
no one's going to say anything to the contrary on that. He is an
right.
elite defender in the NBA.
Right. Like you can maybe like, parse with, the fact that he doesn't move all that well on the perimeter, but it doesn't, when you're so good as a rim protector and you're insulated within the scheme because you have so many good help defenders around most of the time. Right now, the biggest problem with their defense right now is they don't have the guys other than Ben and Jimmy defensively to kind of pick up the slack.
Yeah, they are
that'll come at some point, I think. We'll see. The third, so Kyrie, I want to talk about. You have Kyrie on the third team, right?
Yeah, Kyrie's having a big year. It just doesn't feel like it, does it?
So I think the part of that is because Kyrie, started the season so poorly. We talked about how we thought he was out of shape a little bit coming into the year.
Not a little bit. I think I just levied that straight up. He looked fat.
Yeah, like I definitely agree with you. Like I thought he was out of shape to begin the year.
Yeah.
You look at what he's done recently, it has just been unreal. Before like the last 5 games where he's taken like a small little dip because he had like a couple games that he missed, and he only played 28 minutes and 27 minutes and stuff like that. Like I forget, he had like a little minor injury that I can't remember off the top of my head.
But like, let's go over.
But like you go in the 15 games before that,
right?
26 points a night, 7 assists, 5 rebounds, only 3 turnovers, which is crazy for a guy who takes up as much usage as he does within that offense. 50 field goal percentage, 47 3-point percentage, 90 free throw percentage. Yeah. Insane offensive production. He basically carried the Boston Celtics back to the point where they are now 25-15.
Yeah, we're not talking about the Celtics being in this state of disarray like we were early in the year because Kyrie has taken on more and he's doing more. And maybe those other problems still exist. In fact, I would argue that they do. But Kyrie's covering up those holes. And that's a big deal because that was a big goddamn conversation. Everything, that was happening there. He's having a beast of the year. It's also it doesn't feel like a great year for guards. Just throwing that out there. Hold on, one more thing on Kyrie. 34.4 assist rate this year is the second highest of his career outside of his rookie season. Wow.
Very, very impressive. 11.7 turnover rate, which again, when you have a 30% usage rate, is just insane. Let's talk about those guards because I think the third team is where you get super interesting. I had Paul George on my third team. Who was your fifth forward?
My fifth forward, Durant.
Yeah. So like the 5 forwards, I think are pretty clear. Giannis, Kawhi, LeBron, Durant, and George. I actually think the 6th is pretty clear too.
Who's your 6th?
It's Blake Griffin.
Yeah, I had Blake Griffin written down, but you know what? I'm going with Sabonis.
You're off your fucking rocker.
Nope. No, I'm not. You know why? Because Blake Griffin can't play defense.
I mean, like, Tomanis isn't a great defender here either.
He's a better defender, and that's all that matters.
Like, Blake Griffin is averaging 25 points, 8 rebounds, and 5 assists a night. Domantas Sabonis is like, and look, bench isn't everything. He's averaging like 15, 10, and 3. I mean,
yeah, you're right. It's Blake, but I wanted to say it's Sabonis because Sabonis is having a beast of a year, and I wanted to reward it.
We're going to talk about Domantas in a little bit here.
I wanted to reward it on a level more than just 6th man of the year. That's all I'm saying.
That. That's fair.
Come on,
Blake has been unbelievable. Blake has been unbelievable this year. That Detroit team has been like kind of a dumpster fire at different times. Not a dumpster fire in terms of their record. I mean, they're 17-22.
They're so unimportant. That's really the real kicker. They just don't. They're like the Baltimore Orioles of basketball. Like even when they're doing well, they don't feel important.
It's just tough because he's doing all of this in a scheme that doesn't really fit what his skill set is. Andre Drummond is there taking up space in the middle. Doesn't really have a point guard to throw lobs. Doesn't really have a point guard on that roster to really help him, get easy, efficient offense. He has to create most of what he does, and he's still averaging 25, 8, and 5. On a 48% field goal percentage, 36% from 3, and 75% from the line. What he has done this year is actually just genuinely incredible to me.
Is it really incredible? I mean, has he taken it to? I mean, it's impressive. Don't get me wrong, that he has adapted his game and has been hyper pragmatist and just, okay, here are the spots that are going to be available to me. They're not my favorite spots. They're not spots I've worked at before, but I'm going to make the most of them. That's impressive.
Blake Griffin is he's taking 6 threes a game right now. Yeah. Like, that's the growth and progression in Blake's game over the years has just been so incredible to me. He is an absolutely unbelievable force, in my opinion. Like, Blake Griffin, I think is in my opinion, the pick for most underrated player in the NBA.
Who else is in that conversation? I mean, obviously Domantas Sabonis.
Honestly, Sabonis would be in there if we want to give Sabonis some love.
Vucevic.
I am comfortable with that. Vucevic is in there for sure. I don't think enough people know about Pascal Siakam yet.
No, you're right about that. Though that I feel like that's changing rapidly and is about to get real annoying.
Tobias Harris is probably up there. Tobias Harris
is up at the guy that Blake Griffin was traded for. I think Clint Capella's still up there.
And like Gallinari's having a great year as well. Like,
that's kind of newfangled. I mean, John Collins is in that conversation for me.
John Collins is really in that conversation. But he hasn't reached the level
to a certain degree is in that conversation.
For sure. And Mike Conley was my 7th guy in terms of the guards that ended up falling off.
How about this? Where does Derek Favors fall into that camp for you?
Probably. I think that he's underrated just by nature of his role.
I feel like he's properly rated. Derek Favors has never done anything for me. And every year I end up with him in a fantasy basketball team, and I'm just so unenamored.
Well, let's talk about Blake real quick, because I think the reason and not your fantasy basketball team, the reason that I think Blake is underrated and still doesn't get the attention that he deserves is because of the injuries, first and foremost. I mean, Blake Griffin hasn't made an All-Star game since 2015.
I think it's also because he hadn't made an All-Star team because people viewed it as Chris Paul's team and that they didn't see eye to eye. There was not a great chemistry there outside of some decent on-court stuff. They never really even seemed to play together all that much. Yeah, DeAndre Jordan's still there. I think also then you add in the fact that the Clippers were so eager to get rid of him. They gave him the big deal, which everyone felt was too much money because it's Blake Griffin, blah, blah, blah. And then they basically shipped him out for, at the time, nothing. I mean, Tobias Harris is a really good player, but they'll have to make a decision on that now this offseason. I think that maybe the fact that no one really had love for him, none of his employers seem to have love for him, plays into that a little bit.
So, like, if Blake Griffin is still there on the Los Angeles Clippers, and they have 1 max cap spot instead of 2. This is a hypothetical that like kind of doesn't work because he's making a little bit more than what they'd be able to.
Let's presume it does
in terms of the max. Do you think it's more useful for them to have Blake in place or be able to sell 2 max cap spaces to someone else, or like to 2 other players to come join forces?
I think that's kind of where I'm getting at with why Blake isn't as loved, because he is not the obvious first choice. He is not somebody that you pine over. At the same time, he's clearly of that caliber to where he's a max player, and that should be a trade. He's kind of stuck in no man's land.
To me, like, he's like a for sure Hall of Famer, I think.
Yeah, there's a lot of for sure Hall of Famers in the current NBA. The Basketball Hall of Fame has a very low bar.
Sure, but like I feel like if you would ask the normal like fan, they probably would say, "Why is Blake Griffin a Hall of Famer?"
Dwight Howard is a sure Hall of Famer.
Well, Dwight Howard should be a surefire Hall of Famer. He finished second in an MVP race and like was like a 7 or 8 time All NBA player. Like that's a Dwight Howard's like one of the 100 best players ever. Even if we're talking like MLB Hall of Fame standards, Dwight Howard probably gets in.
Well, Harold Baines got in, so that standard doesn't really apply anymore. And I'm a White Sox fan. I'm saying that. Like, who is real fast off the top of your head? Who is the best player in the NBA currently who's gotten a little veteran who isn't Hall of Fame worthy?
Oh, wow.
Like, is Dame Lillard going to go to the Hall of Fame?
I think he does, yeah. Okay. Maybe like CJ McCollum is probably up there.
Jesus Christ. That's DeMar DeRozan.
DeRozan's up. DeRozan might be the pick. DeRozan is like
DeRozan or Lowry is right there.
Yeah, I was going to say. Kyle Lowry's up there.
What about Kemba?
Kemba is up there. Honestly, Kemba's probably the answer.
Okay.
Because he's like at his peak right now. Should be like a 1 or 2 time All NBA player.
Right.
Yeah, it's probably Kemba right now. Kemba is on my third team, by the way.
What about LaMarcus Aldridge?
I think LaMarcus Aldridge might make the
Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I think he's probably going to get in.
Just wanted to make a point there. Like Derrick Rose is going to make the Hall of Fame. I don't feel good about it, but that's happening.
I don't know if he will.
That's going to happen.
It's going to be close.
Mark it down.
Kemba Walker. Kemba has tailed off a little bit since the start of the year. The Hornets have tailed off a little bit since the start of the year.
Yeah, who expected him to keep up on that torrid pace? I mean, he was right. Number 3 in MVP voting after a couple weeks.
Yeah, after the first month, I would say he was like the number 3 guy in MVP.
He was a full-on god.
Yeah. He's now shooting like 44% from the field, 36% from 3. He's averaging 25 points a night, 6 assists a night. To me, he's like very clearly the number 5 guard. He's very, very good. Damian Lillard as well. I want to bring up Damian Lillard is just awesome right now.
Yeah.
Just everything that you could ask for from a franchise player, team leader, 26 points, 6 assists, 4.5 rebounds. Just such an incredible offensive player. He's like, I don't mean this derogatorily. He is like kind of knockoff like James Harden. It's like James Harden.
Fair. That's fair. It's James Harden and Steph Curry had a baby, and he's the weird mix of their games.
Well, it's just the 3-point percentage, right? The inability to hit like those ridiculous pull-ups at
now I really 40% making that comment because now it sounds weird. I totally agree with the step backs and all that, and the ability to create offense off of nothing. And there's a little bit of force to his game that maybe
just
Steph
like
lacks.
The slightly worse vision. Like it's just like that small step below, but he has the incredible ability to get separation. He finishes inside. He really does a lot of different things that make him incredibly valuable. He's on my second team. I have him as the number 4 guard in the NBA right now. He's just very, very good.
I want to talk about somebody who's on my third team, and I feel really bad about him being on my third team because, frankly, I think you can make the argument he should be on a first team. And that's Nick Jokic. The Joker, his numbers are not, soaring compared to where they were at last year. His assist numbers are up a little bit. His points are up a little bit. But the Denver Nuggets on the whole are way up, man. I mean, they're competing for the number 1 overall seed here. They look at this juncture to be a real-time contender. And that is certainly not something that we thought of. Now, obviously, Mike Malone has a lot to do with that, and there's a lot of positivity to be gleaned from that. They have a deeper roster, all this stuff, getting Paul Millsap and all. There's a lot of good things that are happening there. It's not just Nick Jokic putting it on the back, but this guy's still one of the best in the NBA, and he's still the fulcrum of the Denver offensive system. And I think his defense has gotten just a notch better.
See, to me, that's the big leap for Jokic is the defense. Like, I think he has gotten quite a bit better defensively.
They're doing some interesting stuff with him. I mean, and it's clear that was the number 1 priority of the Denver Nuggets going into this season, which is how do we make it so that we can keep Jokic on the floor for 33 minutes 40 minutes a game, and he doesn't totally kill us on the defensive end. What can we do to, insulate him a little bit? And I think it's working out really well.
Yeah, so like I said, like I'd have him at number 10 in MVP right now, and I have him on my third team. So that is a little bit incongruous. Right. 19.2 points, 10.1 rebounds. That's basically in line with what last year was. 7.5 assists. That's a bit of a jump from what last year was.
About an assist and a half, yeah.
For me, though, the defense is where he has taken the leap. They can have him slide out onto players for 2 or 3 slides onto guards, and then he'll recover back. Sometimes they do just straight switch occasionally. They'll play different coverages. They'll play soft coverages, and he's just so smart that he's able to kind of get by in a way defensively there that they haven't really been capable of in the past. They're still in the top 10 in defensive rating this year. Things have fallen off a little bit over the last month or so for them on defense. They were in the top 3 or 4 for what I would say is a lion's share of the season so far. But the last little while they've struggled as they've dealt with injuries. They've dealt with guys in and out of the lineup. It's just been a little bit harder for them to get that continuity defensively. I've just been generally such a fan of what he's done and continue to be such a fan of what he does. For me, though, the difference between he and Joel Embiid is that Joel is a legit like defensive game-changing guy. Yeah. And then he just takes on like Nikola Jokic's like usage rate and all of this stuff is never going to say like what his overall offensive impact is.
Right.
But there is something to just being able to go and get a bucket in a way that I trust Joel Embiid to do more than Nikola Jokic.
No question on that. I
and that's not to say Jokic is bad. It's just like
certainly no one's saying that. I would just I don't want to put as much value when you're doing the overall handicapping. I don't want to put as much value on a dude being able to just score than a guy who fits the system and makes things happen. I prefer guys who make things happen over guys who just take over and kind of, do the solo act thing. And that's not to say Joel is just doing the solo act. That is what's asked of him. Blah,
well,
blah,
you know what?
But like Jokic makes stuff happen. He brings some joy, and I like that.
Well, you can't make the argument that Embiid is a bigger part of Philly's offense than Jokic is of Denver's offense.
And that's just not going to be – you're going to have to get real deep into the numbers to find something to match up with that. But watching the game, it's clearly obvious that that's the case.
Yeah, he's the hub. Like I said, he'd be in the top 10 of MVP for me right now. Just, slightly lower. And then I have Kyle Lowry at is my sixth guard. He's just been awesome as a distributor this year. He's been a little bit better defensively than he's been in the last couple of years. He's been the maestro of a team that is, like we've talked about, one of the two best teams in the NBA right now.
Yeah, I mean, just some of the peripheral numbers really don't do it for me, if I'm being totally honest. I mean,
I get that. Like he's averaging like 14 a game.
Yeah, great offensive numbers, though. He has a 116 rating, so that's in line with Curry and Durant and Harden, who's even a little bit lower than that. So they're great stuff. But, I mean, 12.5 PIE, it just doesn't – some of the numbers just don't get there. But, right, if you're taking into account maybe some of the non-numbers, it's huge. I have Ben Simmons on there because he is putting up some big numbers. And while there are a lot of deficiencies in Ben Simmons' game, he's still quite the dude. And and if we're qualifying him as a guard now, because he is handling the vast majority, if not all, of the point guard responsibilities for the 76ers when he's on the court, that still matters to me. Right now, he's at 16.4 points per game, 9 rebounds, 8 assists, 1.3 steals. We know what he can do on the defensive end. He's doing all of this without a jump shot at all. Not just not a viable jump shot, just any jump shot. Everyone knows what's coming, and he's still getting it done. So Ben Simmons made it, though. I like that Kyle Lowry pick. That makes me think if I want to rethink it. But that's gonna be a deep dive. Right now, I'm going with Simmons.